With all due respect, Ambassador Cathlax, I must politely but firmly disagree with your assessment of the situation. The Arxian diplomat's secondary breathing sacs deflated slightly as Ambassador Sarah Chen delivered these words with an eerily pleasant smile. Having served as the liaison to the human diplomatic corps for nearly 3 solar cycles, Cathlax had learned to recognize the subtle warning signs that preceded what humans called diplomatic incidents. This particular combination, the measured tone, precise language, and that distinctly predatory smile, sent his threat detection glands into overdrive. In the observation gallery above, junior diplomatic analyst Zurix leaned toward her mentor. I don't understand, honored teacher. The human ambassador's vital signs are stable. Her tone is courteous, and her body language appears non-threatening. Yet you seem concerned? Senior diplomatic analyst Tapax clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Ah, my eager student. You've just encountered one of the most fascinating and dangerous aspects of human diplomatic behavior. What you're witnessing is what we call weaponized politeness. He gestured toward his datapad. Pull up the incident reports from the Centaurian Trade Summit. The ones marked, classified, O-stars, never again. Zurix's optical sensors widened as she scrolled through the files. But this says the human representative maintained perfect diplomatic protocol throughout the entire negotiation, right up until, oh my. Precisely. Tapax's antennae twitched in remembered anxiety. The more politely a human speaks in a diplomatic setting, the more likely they are to be plotting something catastrophically creative. It's become something of an unofficial metric among veteran xenodiplomats. We call it the inverse civility scale. Below them, Ambassador Chen was still smiling that terrible smile as she continued. Perhaps we could review the terms of the Proxima Accords. Specifically Section 7, Subsection C, Paragraph 4. The one about unauthorized mining operations in protected cultural heritage zones. Cathlax's threat glands were now working overtime. He knew that tone. That was the tone humans used right before they did something both completely legal and absolutely devastating to their opposition. The last time he'd heard it, the Regelian Trade Commissioner had ended up legally bound to convert his entire fleet to run on sustainably sourced rainbow glitter fuel. The contract had been airtight. I've heard stories, Drix whispered, about something humans call malicious compliance. Is this? Oh, this is far worse, Tapax interrupted. This is what happens when you combine malicious compliance with their terrifying ability to find loopholes in any agreement, their strange fondness for what they call poetic justice, and their species' collective determination to prove a point in the most dramatically ironic way possible. As if to prove his point, Ambassador Chen was now pulling up a series of holographic displays, each showing various legal documents, trade agreements, and what appeared to be recipes for something called humble pie. You see, she continued, her smile growing even more cordial. While reviewing the historical archives, I couldn't help but notice some fascinating parallels between your current mining operation and a delightful Earth tradition called karmic retribution. Cathlax felt his survival instinct screaming at him to flee the room immediately, but he couldn't. Not without violating at least 3 different diplomatic protocols. Protocols that, he suddenly realized with dawning horror, the human ambassador had probably counted on when planning whatever this was. In the gallery, Tapax was using the moment as a teaching opportunity. Notice how she's maintained perfect posture throughout. Classic sign of a human diplomat about to unleash what they call righteous bureaucratic fury. The more impeccable their manners, the more thoroughly they've planned their revenge. But surely they can't always, Zurix began. Let me tell you about the Arcturus incident, Tapax cut in. Did you know humans have something called interpretive dance? Well, one of their diplomats managed to legally redefine an entire sector's trade regulations through a carefully choreographed performance of Swan Lake. The really impressive part was how they got everyone to sign off on it while serving tea and crumpets. Ambassador Chen was now methodically laying out a series of data crystals. Of course, we could simply defer to the precedent established during the Betelgeuse arbitration of 2347. I believe your predecessor found that particular ruling quite illuminating. Cathlax's memory glands throbbed at the mention of that infamous case. The human diplomatic team had somehow managed to resolve a century-old territorial dispute by citing ancient Earth maritime law, 3 different cookie recipes, and something called the principle of finders keepers, losers weepers. The resulting agreement had been simultaneously legally binding, surprisingly fair, and deeply embarrassing for everyone who had initially opposed it. Watch closely, Tapax instructed his student. See how she's arranged those data crystals? That's not random. Humans have an odd obsession with what they call dramatic timing. She's building up to something. But what could she possibly? Jurix fell silent as Ambassador Chen activated the first crystal. Item 1, the ambassador announced, her voice practically dripping with professional courtesy. A comprehensive analysis of Section 7's linguistic evolution across 12 different translations, with particular attention to the Oxford comma's role in interstellar law. Cathlax felt his fourth heart skip a beat. Humans and their Oxford commas had once reduced the Vulpex Consortium's legal team to tears. Item 2. A fascinating collection of Earth historical precedents regarding protected cultural sites, including, and I think you'll find this particularly relevant, the rather creative solutions employed during something we called the Great Bacon Rebellion of 2156. In the gallery, Tapax's antennae were now fully erect in alarm. By the void, she's going full human on this one. Look at how she's subtly working Earth historical references into every other sentence. That's not just for color. They use those as legal precedents somehow. Never ask a human about their history unless you're prepared for them to weaponize it against you. Item 3. Chen continued, her smile now reaching levels of politeness that should have been physically impossible. A detailed proposal for resolving our current situation through what we on Earth traditionally call killing them with kindness. Cathlax knew he was trapped, somewhere in the last few minutes, probably while he'd been distracted by her perfectly civil tone and immaculate presentation. The human ambassador had maneuvered him into a position where any response other than complete cooperation would trigger at least 15 different diplomatic clauses, each of which, he strongly suspected, would somehow work out in humanity's favor. And finally, Chen concluded, activating the last crystal with a flourish that was both entirely professional and subtly threatening. A small gift from the people of Earth, a traditional human delicacy called humble pie, along with detailed instructions for its consumption in accordance with Section 12's provisions regarding ceremonial conflict resolution through shared gastronomial experiences. In the observation gallery, Jurix's optical sensors had expanded to their maximum diameter. Is she actually suggesting— "Oh yes," Tapax confirmed grimly. She's invoking the break bread or break treaties clause. It's one of humanity's specialties, forcing their opponents to either literally eat humble pie or metaphorically eat crow. Sometimes both, if they're feeling particularly diplomatic about it. Below, Cathlax was rapidly calculating his options. The mining operation was technically legal according to the letter of the law, but Chen had somehow managed to make that irrelevant through what appeared to be a masterful combination of actual regulations, Earth cultural practices, and the kind of creative interpretation that only humans seemed capable of pulling off while maintaining a straight face. Of course, Chen added, her tone now reaching heights of politeness that bordered on psychological warfare. We could always explore alternative solutions. I believe I have a lovely presentation prepared on the historical significance of Earth's ancient Uno reverse card in diplomatic proceedings. That did it. Cathlax knew when he was beaten, and more importantly, knew when a human diplomat was giving him one last chance to surrender gracefully before they deployed something truly horrifying, like interpretive bureaucracy or weaponized traditional folk songs. Perhaps, he managed, trying to keep his threat glands from completely shutting down. We could discuss the immediate cessation of all mining operations in the protected zones. Over tea, of course. I believe you mentioned something about crumpets earlier. Chen's smile shifted from terrifyingly polite to genuinely pleased so quickly that Cathlax almost got diplomatic whiplash. What a wonderful suggestion. I brought a lovely Earl Grey, and the crumpets are my grandmother's recipe. She always said there's nothing like a proper tea service to celebrate new understandings between friends. In the gallery, Tapax was already updating the diplomatic database, and that, young Jurix, is why the first rule of xenodiplomacy is, the more polite the human, the faster you should reconsider your life choices. Some species breathe fire, others have natural armor or venomous spines. Humans? They weaponized good manners and somehow made it more terrifying than any of those. Jurix watched as Ambassador Chen began setting up what appeared to be an elaborate tea service, complete with tiny sandwiches and something called scones. Should we be concerned about the food? It couldn't possibly be actually dangerous, could it? Oh, the food itself is perfectly safe, Tapax assured her. It's what it represents that's dangerous. Humans have this saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. They've basically turned being nice into a tactical advantage. The tea ceremony isn't just a tea ceremony. It's a subtle reminder that they can destroy you with kindness and make you thank them for the privilege. Below, Cathlax was discovering that the scones were, in fact, delicious, which somehow made the whole situation even more unsettling. Chen was now chatting amiably about Earth weather patterns and their historical impact on diplomatic relations, somehow managing to work 3 different treaty references and what sounded suspiciously like a binding verbal agreement into what appeared to be casual small talk. The truly brilliant part, Tapax continued his lecture, is that they managed to do all this while technically maintaining perfect diplomatic protocol. That's why the inverse civility scale is so important. When a human diplomat starts acting like your best friend, that's when you know they've already figured out exactly how to dismantle your entire position, using nothing but smiles, proper etiquette, and an encyclopedic knowledge of obscure regulatory subsections. But surely we could learn to do the same, Zurich suggested hopefully. Tapac's mandibles clicked in amusement. Many have tried. The problem is, humans don't just practice diplomatic warfare. They genuinely enjoy it. They turn it into an art form. Did you know they have entire schools dedicated to something called passive-aggressive communication? It's basically weaponized subtext. They start learning it in childhood, apparently. As if to demonstrate this point, Ambassador Chen was now explaining to Cathlax, in the most helpful and sympathetic tone imaginable, exactly how many ways his mining operation had violated not just the letter, but the spirit of galactic law, all while serving him tea and complimenting his choice of diplomatic attire. And the most amazing part, Tapax concluded, is that they somehow managed to make you feel like they're doing you a favor by diplomatically destroying you. Watch. In about 10 minutes, Cathlax is going to thank her for helping him avoid an international incident, and he'll actually mean it. Sure enough, as the tea ceremony concluded, Cathlax found himself expressing genuine gratitude to Chen for her thoughtful and thorough assistance in identifying potential areas of regulatory concern. She had, after all, saved him from what could have been a much more embarrassing situation, even if she had been the one preparing to create said situation in the first place. Remember this lesson well, Tapax told his student as they watched Chen and Cathlax exchange perfectly cordial farewells. When dealing with humans, always remember, the more politely they treat you, the more thoroughly they've planned your diplomatic demise. And if they invite you to tea, check your treaty obligations twice and your cultural sensitivity protocols thrice, because you're either about to be outmaneuvered in the most elegant way possible, or you're about to become a case study in their diplomatic training programs under the heading, "And this is why we always bring crumpets." As they left the observation gallery, Zurich couldn't help but notice that Tapax was already sending out updates to the Xeno-Diplomatic Best Practices Guide. The new entry, she noted with growing appreciation for human diplomatic techniques, was titled Tea and Treaties, a comprehensive guide to surviving human diplomatic politeness, or why the word respectfully in human diplomatic communications should be treated as a warning sign. Somewhere in the distance they could hear Ambassador Chen humming something that sounded suspiciously like, "Kill him with kindness," as she packed up her tea set, already planning her next diplomatic engagement with what Tapax would later describe as the kind of cheerful efficiency that should make any seasoned diplomat seriously reconsider their life choices. And thus, another chapter was added to the ever-growing collection of cautionary tales about human diplomatic relations, filed away under reasons why having a nice chat over tea with human diplomats should be classified as an advanced tactical maneuver. Did they just solve an interstellar trade dispute with memes? Senior diplomatic analyst Tapax checked his datapad for the 3rd time, mandibles clicking in what might have been either amusement or existential dread. Not exactly, young Zurichs. They solved it with what they call PowerPoint presentation karaoke. The memes were just garnish. The observation chamber of the Galactic Diplomatic Corps Academy for Advanced Xeno-Relations was currently hosting its annual Understanding Human Diplomatic Methodologies seminar. Today's case study was causing considerable confusion among the junior analysts, but the official record states that Ambassador Chen's presentation was, and I quote, "a masterful synthesis of ancient Earth cultural references, modern diplomatic protocol, and something called Rick Astley," Zurich noted, her optical sensors cycling through various frequencies in an attempt to make sense of the recording. "Ah yes, the infamous Rickroll resolution of 2349, Tapax reminisced. That was when we first realized that humans had evolved beyond conventional diplomatic warfare into something far more creative. The hollow screen currently displayed what appeared to be an ancient Earth image of a woman yelling at a confused-looking feline. Somehow, this had been instrumental in resolving a century-old dispute over mining rights in the Carina Nebula. You see, Tapax continued, settling into his teaching posture, humans have this remarkable ability to weaponize literally anything, including, perhaps especially, their own cultural absurdity. The real genius is how they manage to make it legally binding. A new student raised an appendage. But surely the other parties didn't actually accept. Oh, but they did, Tapax interrupted. That's the beauty of it. By the time anyone realized what was happening, Ambassador Chen had already tied the entire presentation into 17 different subsections of galactic law, 3 ancient Earth precedents involving something called dad jokes, and a surprisingly robust legal framework based on what humans refer to as the principle of being a good sport about it. The recording continued, showing Ambassador Chen cheerfully explaining complex trade regulations through a series of what she called vintage internet classics. Somehow, she had managed to make the distracted boyfriend meme a legally binding precedent for resource allocation disputes. But how is this even possible? Another student demanded. Our legal systems are based on logic, reason, and carefully documented precedent. Tapax's antennae wiggled in what the students had come to recognize as his "Oh, you sweet summer child" expression. That's exactly what the Regellian Trade Commission said, right before Ambassador Chen convinced them that the "this is fine" dog meme was a perfect metaphor for their current regulatory framework. The recording had reached what Tapax considered the crucial moment. Ambassador Chen, with perfect diplomatic poise, explaining why the Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man meme was actually a brilliant illustration of the redundancy in competing trade claims. Pay attention here, he instructed his students. Notice how she's maintained absolute professional decorum, while simultaneously making it impossible for anyone to object without looking like they don't have a sense of humor? That's advanced human diplomatic technique right there. Zurich's note-taking appendage was working overtime. Is this related to what you taught us about their weaponized politeness strategy? Indeed. Tapax brightened considerably. This is actually an evolution of that technique. We call it the "I'm not even mad, that's amazing" protocol. Humans discovered that if they can make their diplomatic opponents laugh, or at least appreciate the sheer audacity of their approach, they're much more likely to achieve their objectives. The hollow screen now showed the reaction of various alien diplomats, as Ambassador Chen explained complex maritime law through a series of SpongeBob SquarePants screenshots. Most notably, the Vulpex representative appeared to be trying very hard not to smile. The really clever part, Tapax continued, is how they combine this approach with their terrifying ability to find loopholes in any agreement. Did you know that the entire Arcturus sector's mining regulations now include a clause about vibing checks? Nobody's quite sure how that happened, but it's been surprisingly effective at preventing disputes. A student in the back raised all 3 of their appendages. But what about dignity? Decorum? The gravitas of diplomatic relations? Tapax's mandibles clicked in what was definitely amusement this time. Ah, you've just highlighted another crucial aspect of human diplomatic strategy. They've somehow managed to convince the galactic community that having a sense of humor about serious matters is actually a sign of sophisticated diplomatic acumen. The recording had reached its conclusion, showing Ambassador Chen wrapping up her presentation with what appeared to be a choreographed dance number set to "Never Gonna Give You Up." Somehow, by the end, she had secured unanimous agreement on all proposed trade reforms. The aftermath reports are particularly interesting, Tapax noted, pulling up additional data. Several species actually requested copies of the presentation for their own diplomatic training programs. The Andromedans even tried to create their own memes, although their attempt to use quantum physics equations as punchlines didn't quite have the same impact. Zurich was still struggling with certain aspects, but how do they decide when to use this approach versus their other diplomatic strategies? That's the thing about humans, Tapax explained, his tone becoming almost reverent. They have an almost supernatural ability to read a room, or in this case, a galactic assembly, and know exactly how much absurdity they can get away with while still maintaining professional credibility. The next section of the recording showed various alien diplomats actually laughing as they signed the new trade agreements. Someone had added cartoon sunglasses to their official diplomatic seals. Perhaps most impressively, Tapax continued, they've managed to make this approach retroactively applicable. Did you know there's now an official diplomatic protocol called "The Previous Meeting Has Been Declared a Vibe"? It allows for the renegotiation of any agreement that was, quote, too stuffy and really needed to lighten up a bit. A new student, fresh from the Outer Rim territories, raised an appendage. But surely this can't work for truly serious matters. Tapax's expression shifted to what his students recognized as his, "Oh, you're about to learn something terrifying about humans" face. Let me tell you about the Betelgeuse Peace Accords. Ambassador Chen managed to prevent an interstellar war by explaining complex arms reduction treaties through what she called interpretive TikTok dances. The really impressive part was getting both sides to join in for the final number. The seminar room fell silent as this information was processed. Finally, Jurek spoke up. "So what you're saying is..." "Yes," Tapax confirmed. "When dealing with human diplomats, if they start incorporating what they call vintage internet culture into official proceedings, you should be at least as concerned as when they're being excessively polite. Possibly more so, because it means they're confident enough in their position to risk looking silly, and that usually means they've already won." The recording's final frames showed Ambassador Chen teaching a group of very serious-looking alien diplomats how to do something called the Macarena, while simultaneously finalizing terms for a new galactic trade consortium. And that, Tapax concluded, is why the Xenodiplomatic Best Practices Guide now includes a section titled, "If a Human Diplomat Starts Playing Ancient Earth Music, Check Your Treaty Obligations Immediately." It's right after the chapter on why you should be worried if they offer you tea. As the seminar concluded, the students filed out, many of them still trying to understand how Doge memes had become an accepted form of diplomatic discourse. Tapax noticed Jarik's lingering behind, staring thoughtfully at the final freeze frame of Ambassador Chen's presentation. "Something on your mind, young one?" "I was just thinking," Jarik said slowly, "about how the humans have essentially weaponized joy. They've found a way to make diplomatic negotiations not just productive, but fun." Tapax's antennae wiggled approvingly. "Now you're beginning to understand. That's what makes them so formidable and so fascinating. They've turned diplomatic relations into an art form that somehow combines strict legal procedure with what they call maximum chaotic good energy." As they left the seminar room, Tapax's datapad pinged with a new notification. "Oh my," he chittered. "It seems Ambassador Chen has just resolved another border dispute. According to this, she used something called Uncle Iroh wisdom quotes, combined with interpretive sock puppet theater." Jarik's optical sensors widened. "And it worked?" "Of course it worked," Tapax sighed. "It always works. That's why the first rule of modern xenodiplomacy is, if a human diplomat starts smiling, be worried. If they start making jokes, be very worried. And if they start playing ancient Earth music while setting up a presentation titled Why This Treaty is Actually a Big Mood, run," Jurek suggested. "No," Tapax corrected. "At that point, you might as well sit back and enjoy the show. Because somehow, by the end of it, you're going to find yourself signing exactly the agreement they wanted, and you're probably going to be teaching your staff how to do the cha-cha slide at the celebration party." And somewhere in the Diplomatic Corps headquarters, Ambassador Chen was already preparing her next presentation, this one tentatively titled, "Thank You for Coming to My TED Talk, a comprehensive analysis of interstellar trade law through the lens of cat videos." The galaxy, it seemed, would never be quite the same. "Remember," Senior Diplomatic Analyst Tapax instructed his increasingly bewildered student, "if a human diplomat suggests grabbing coffee, they're not actually talking about coffee." Jurik's optical sensors adjusted in confusion, but Ambassador Chen is literally holding a beverage container labeled coffee right now. Yes, they do actually consume the beverage," Tapax acknowledged, his antennae twitching with what might have been amusement. "But getting coffee is what humans call a social construct. It's like their tea ceremonies, but more casual, and somehow even more dangerous." They were observing yet another fascinating example of human diplomatic methodology. Below, in what was officially designated as the embassy's totally normal break room, not a secret negotiation space, we promise, Ambassador Sarah Chen was indeed holding a cup of coffee while chatting with representatives from 3 different star systems about what appeared to be, at least on the surface, nothing of particular importance. "Watch closely," Tapax advised. "Notice how she keeps the conversation light, mostly focused on something called weekend plans and local weather patterns. But pay attention to the subtext." Zrix, who had been studying human diplomatic techniques with increasing fascination, leaned forward. Is this related to their weaponized politeness strategy or their meme diplomacy approach? This, Tapax declared with professional pride, is something even more sophisticated. We call it the Just Casual Coffee Chat Protocol, though its official designation in the diplomatic handbook is informal channels that aren't actually informal at all, but we pretend they are because that somehow makes them more effective. Below, Ambassador Chen was now showing the alien representatives pictures of something called a cat on her personal device. Somehow this had led to a discussion about renewable energy initiatives in the Orion sector. The brilliance of it, Tapax continued, is that by maintaining this facade of casualness, humans create an environment where other species feel more comfortable making concessions they'd never agree to in a formal setting. They call it spitballing ideas, though I've yet to see any actual spitballs involved. But surely everyone knows this is a diplomatic technique by now, Zurix wondered. We're literally watching it happen from an observation room specifically designed for studying human diplomatic methods. Tapax's mandibles clicked in what his students had come to recognize as his "humans are simultaneously hilarious and terrifying" expression. Oh, everyone knows. That's the really fascinating part. Somehow, knowing it's a diplomatic technique doesn't make it any less effective. If anything, it makes it more effective, because now everyone can pretend together that they're just having a casual chat, while actually conducting high-level negotiations. As if to prove his point, Ambassador Chen was now discussing what appeared to be a complex trade agreement involving 3 different sectors, all while showing the alien representatives how to play something called Words with Friends on her datapad. Pay attention to this part, Tapax instructed. She's about to deploy what humans call the friendship speedrun strategy. Sure enough, Chen was now engaging in what appeared to be personal small talk with each representative, somehow managing to find common ground with species that had evolved on completely different types of planets. How does she do that? Zurix wondered aloud. The Proxians don't even have the same concept of family as most species, but she's somehow relating to them about parent-child relationships? Humans, Tapax explained with something approaching awe, have this almost supernatural ability to find common ground with any species. They can relate virtually any experience to something in their own culture. Watch, she's about to compare the Proxian larval guardian bond to something called helping your kids with their math homework. The Proxian representative's color-changing skin had shifted to what xenobiologists recognized as their deep emotional resonance pattern. Somehow, Chen had managed to create a genuine connection while simultaneously laying the groundwork for a major trade agreement. But that's not even the most impressive part, Tapax continued. Keep watching. She's about to introduce something humans call the group chat. Below, Chen was indeed setting up some kind of informal communication channel between all the representatives. Just for sharing cat pictures and memes, she explained with a smile that Tapax recognized as her "this is definitely going to become an unofficial diplomatic backchannel" expression. The really clever part, he explained to his student, is that by creating these informal networks, humans build diplomatic relationships that operate outside traditional channels while still maintaining perfect deniability. After all, they're just sharing cat pictures. Zurix's note-taking appendage was working overtime. Is this why the Diplomatic Corps' official handbook now includes a chapter titled, "Why You Should Be Very Concerned If a Human Suggests Getting Coffee to Discuss Things Casually"? Exactly. Tapax's antennae wiggled enthusiastically. Though that's actually just part of the larger section on informal human diplomatic techniques that are actually formal diplomatic techniques in disguise, but we all pretend they aren't because it's more fun that way. The scene below had evolved into what appeared to be a casual gaming session, with Chen teaching the representatives how to play something called Among Us. Somehow, this had led to a breakthrough in negotiations over contested space lanes. Notice how she's using the game mechanics as metaphors for diplomatic relations, Tapax pointed out. That's advanced human technique right there. They call it making learning fun. Though in diplomatic contexts it's more like making complex negotiations feel like a social activity. But why does it work? Zurix pressed. Surely other species could attempt similar techniques. Tapax's expression shifted to what his colleagues called his explaining why humans are special face. Many have tried. The problem is, humans don't just practice these techniques. They genuinely enjoy them. They actually find diplomatic relations more productive when they're having fun. It's like they've weaponized the concept of friendship itself. Chen was now showing the representatives something called cat videos, while casually mentioning possible solutions to a long-standing dispute over mining rights. The Arcturian representative, whose species was normally known for their stoic demeanor, was actually laughing. "Did you know," Tapax added, "that humans have something called work friends? It's like regular friendship, but specifically in professional contexts. They somehow manage to make personal connections a legitimate diplomatic tool while still maintaining professional boundaries." Zerix's optical sensors widened. "Is that why Ambassador Chen's unofficial diplomatic success rate is so high? Because she's actually making friends?" Tapax finished. "Yes, but it's more complicated than that. She's making friends while simultaneously conducting complex diplomatic negotiations while also actually enjoying herself while also maintaining perfect professional standards. Humans call it multitasking, though in diplomatic contexts it's more like achieving multiple objectives while making it look like you're just hanging out." Below, Chen had somehow managed to turn a discussion about proper coffee brewing techniques into an analogy for sustainable resource management. The representatives were now eagerly sharing their own species' beverage preparation methods, which had somehow led to a breakthrough in cross-cultural understanding. "And here comes the masterstroke," Tapax announced. "Watch how she's going to suggest regular coffee meetings, just to keep in touch, while simultaneously establishing an ongoing informal diplomatic channel that will probably be more effective than any official one." Sure enough, Chen was now setting up what she called a standing coffee date with all the representatives. "Just to chat and share more cat videos," she explained with a smile that clearly meant, "We'll actually be conducting ongoing diplomatic negotiations in a casual setting that makes everyone more comfortable with making concessions." "The really impressive part," Tapax noted, "is that she'll actually follow through with the cat videos and casual conversation. Humans understand that maintaining the social aspect is just as important as the diplomatic one. They call it building relationships, though in diplomatic terms it's more like creating a network of unofficial channels that operate on friendship in cat videos." As the session wrapped up, Chen had somehow managed to 1. Establish regular informal meetings with 3 different species. 2. Create a group chat that would definitely become a diplomatic backchannel. 3. Resolve 2 minor trade disputes. 4. Get everyone addicted to cat videos. 5. Set up a weekly gaming session that would absolutely be used for diplomatic negotiations. 6. Actually enjoy herself while doing all of the above. "And that," Tapax concluded, "is why the first rule of modern xenodiplomacy is, never underestimate a human suggesting casual coffee. They're probably about to create an entire unofficial diplomatic network while showing you pictures of their pets." As they left the observation room, Zurix noticed a new notification on the diplomatic network. Ambassador Chen had already sent the first message to the group chat. It was, of course, a cat video, but somehow, the accompanying comment about cute kitties working together had sparked a productive discussion about interstellar cooperation. "I think I finally understand," Zurix declared. "Humans haven't just mastered diplomatic techniques. They've found a way to make diplomacy itself more enjoyable for everyone involved." Tapax's antennae wiggled in approval. "Exactly. That's why we've had to update the diplomatic handbook so many times. The latest edition includes a whole chapter on why you should just accept that all your important diplomatic breakthroughs will probably happen during what humans call casual coffee chats." And somewhere in the embassy, Ambassador Chen was already planning her next casual coffee meeting, her datapad filled with both cat videos and detailed diplomatic strategies. After all, as humans like to say, why not have fun while saving the galaxy? And that concludes today's session on Standard Diplomatic Proto. Oh, just one more thing. Senior diplomatic analyst Tapax's threat glands immediately went into overdrive. In his years of studying human diplomatic techniques, he'd learned to recognize this particular phrase as what humans called a red flag. Beside him, Zurix's optical sensors widened in recognition. "Is this?" "Yes," Tapax confirmed grimly. "The infamous Columbo Gambit, named after some ancient Earth entertainment figure who apparently specialized in catching people off guard just when they thought they were safe." Below, in the main diplomatic chamber, Ambassador Sarah Chen was performing what Tapax had come to recognize as a masterclass in human timing. She'd waited until the Zalaxian trade delegation was literally rising from their seats, their guard completely down after what they thought was a successful negotiation in their favor. "It's nothing major," Chen continued, her tone perfectly casual. "I just happened to notice this fascinating correlation between your proposed trade routes and some recently declassified data about subspace anomalies. Would you mind taking a quick look?" It'll only take a moment. The Xylaxian ambassador's secondary breathing apparatus made a sound that Tapax recognized as the alien equivalent of, "Oh no." "Pay very close attention here," Tapax instructed his student. "This is what we call advanced human timing manipulation, though in the official handbook it's listed under why you should never relax until you're at least 3 star systems away from a human diplomat." Chen was now pulling up what appeared to be a completely innocent set of star charts. "See, if you look at these patterns here," she gestured casually, "and compare them to Article 7 of the trade agreement we just discussed." "Is she actually—" Jrix began. "Oh yes," Tapax's antennae twitched in professional admiration. "She deliberately let them think they'd outmaneuvered her on the main points just so she could spring this minor detail that will completely reshape the entire agreement in Earth's favor." The Xylaxian delegation was now huddled around the display, their color-shifting skin betraying their growing realization that they'd walked right into what humans called a gotcha moment. "You see," Tapax continued his lecture, "humans have this remarkable ability to weaponize timing itself. They understand that the psychological impact of revealing crucial information at precisely the right moment can be more effective than any amount of formal negotiation." Below, Chen was still maintaining her perfectly casual demeanor as she systematically dismantled the Xylaxians' entire negotiating position through what she claimed were just some interesting observations about their proposed trade routes. "But surely other species could employ similar timing," Jrix suggested. Tapax's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Many have tried. The Arcturians once attempted to copy this technique. They waited until the end of negotiations to bring up their key points, but they made the mistake of announcing, 'And now for our clever tactical revelation. First, humans understand that the power lies in making it seem completely unplanned.'" Chen had now moved on to what she called just a few quick notes about the historical precedents for subspace lane regulation. Somehow these quick notes were rapidly evolving into a comprehensive restructuring of the entire trade agreement. "Notice how she's maintaining that air of casual discovery?" Tapax pointed out. "As if she's just happening to notice these critical details right now, rather than having planned this moment down to the microsecond. That's advanced human technique right there." "But the timing of this particular deployment," Jrix mused, "right after they thought they'd succeeded." "Exactly." Tapax's antennae wiggled enthusiastically. "Humans call it psychological momentum. They understand that there's a unique vulnerability in the moment of perceived victory. It's like their ancient art of what they call plot twists, but applied to diplomatic relations." The Xylaxian delegation was now frantically reviewing their own documentation, but it was clearly too late. Chen had timed her revelation perfectly. They were too invested in the negotiation to walk away, but too off-balance to effectively counter her points. "Did you know," Tapax added, "that humans actually have a saying for this? It's not over until the fat lady sings. None of us are entirely sure what a fat lady has to do with diplomatic negotiations. But we've learned to be extremely wary of any human diplomat who says just one more thing, or before you go, or even, oh, by the way." Chen was now somehow using the Xylaxians' own data to support Earth's position, all while maintaining the appearance of someone who was just having an interesting intellectual discussion rather than executing a carefully planned diplomatic maneuver. "The really impressive part," Tapax noted, "is how she's giving them an opportunity to save face. See how she's framing it as a collaborative discovery rather than a tactical revelation? Humans call it letting them down easy, though in diplomatic terms it's more like crushing their position while making it look like you're doing them a favor." Jrix's note-taking appendage was working overtime. "Is this why the latest edition of the Diplomatic Handbook includes a chapter titled Common Human Phrases that should trigger immediate diplomatic caution? Indeed, though that's actually just a subsection of the larger chapter on why you should never think a meeting with humans is actually over until you've left the solar system." Tapax's expression shifted to what his colleagues called his sharing ancient human wisdom face. "They have this old entertainment figure called Mary Poppins who apparently said, 'Well begun is half done.' Humans seem to have adapted this into 'well timed is completely won.'" Below, Chen had somehow managed to turn what started as a quick observation into a complete renegotiation of the trade agreement. The Xylaxian delegation, still trying to figure out exactly how they'd ended up in this position, was now actually thanking her for bringing these important considerations to their attention. "And here comes the masterstroke," Tapax announced. "Watch how she's going to suggest taking a quick break to process all this new information. which will definitely become an opportunity for them to realize they have no choice but to accept her proposals. Sure enough, Chen was now calling for what she termed a short recess, with a smile that clearly meant, "I'm giving you time to accept your diplomatic defeat gracefully." The truly brilliant part, Tapax continued, is that she'll probably use this break to get coffee with them, thereby combining this technique with what we learned about their casual diplomatic channels. It's like watching a master artist at work, except the art is making other species think their diplomatic defeat was actually their idea. As the Zalaxian delegation filed out, still looking slightly dazed, Jurix noticed something interesting. They actually seem grateful, even though she just completely outmaneuvered them? That's the real genius of human diplomatic timing, Tapax explained. When deployed correctly, it makes the other party feel like they've discovered something important rather than fallen into a trap. Humans call it having an epiphany, though in diplomatic contexts it's more like realizing you've been checkmated but appreciating the elegance of the game. The observation room's monitors showed Chen already setting up what appeared to be both coffee and some kind of earth snack called cookies in the break room, for when they need a little pick-me-up, she explained to an aide with a smile that clearly meant, for when they need to process how thoroughly I just transformed this negotiation. And that, Tapax concluded, is why the first rule of modern xenodiplomacy is, never trust a human diplomat who says just one more thing. In fact, never trust a human diplomat who seems to be finished at all. Always assume they have at least 3 more diplomatic maneuvers planned, probably involving both perfect timing and snack food. As they left the observation room, Jurix noticed a new addition to the Diplomatic Advisory Network. Warning: human diplomatic timing protocols now include something called post-credit scenes. Remain alert even after formal conclusions. I think I finally understand, Jurix declared. Humans haven't just mastered diplomatic timing. They've turned it into a form of psychological art. Tapax's antennae wiggled in approval. Exactly. That's why we've had to update the diplomatic handbook yet again. The latest edition includes a whole new section on why the most dangerous part of any negotiation with humans is when you think it's already over. And somewhere in the embassy, Ambassador Chen was already planning her next, just one more thing moment, her datapad filled with both carefully timed revelations and coffee meeting schedules. After all, as humans like to say, timing is everything, especially when it came to diplomatic relations. Oh, and just one more thing, Tapax added as they reached the exit, causing Jurix to freeze in sudden alarm. Never try to beat humans at their own timing game. The Centaurian delegation once attempted it, but they made the mistake of saying just one more thing first. Ambassador Chen responded with, "Oh, that reminds me of another thing," followed by, "and while we're on the subject," and finally, "before I forget." The resulting negotiation lasted 3 extra days, and somehow ended with the Centaurians apologizing for taking up her time. The end.